Why Belgium returned Lumumba's golden tooth. Born into the village of Onalua in Kasai Province, Belgian Congo on July 2, 1925, was Patrice Lumumba, an African nationalist leader. Malcolm Marx called him the greatest black man who ever walked the African continent. He later died on January 17, 1961, in Katanga Province after Belgium and the US plotted his assassination. Patrice Lumumba was an African nationalist politician who briefly held the position of the first prime minister of the newly formed Democratic Republic of the Congo, June to September 1960, before being driven out due to a political crisis. He was assassinated in early 1961. Most famous for serving as the first prime minister of the newly formed Democratic Republic of the Congo in 1960, being driven out of that position after less than 3 months, and then being assassinated the following year. He belonged to the tiny ethnic community of Beitela, and this fact became important in his later political career. Both of his two main rivals, Joseph Kasavubu, who later became the president of the Congo, and Moise Tshombe, who oversaw the breakaway of the Katanga province, were members of sizable, influential ethnic groups from which they drew the majority of their support, giving their political movements a local flavor. Lumumba's movement, on the other hand, stressed the fact that it was entirely Congolese. Lumumba began working at Kindu Port-Mpain after graduating from a Protestant missionary school, where he was active in the Club of the Evolues, Western-educated Africans. He started penning poems and essays for Congolese journals. Additionally, he petitioned for and was granted full Belgian citizenship. After that, Lumumba relocated to Leopoldville, now Kinshasa, to work as a postal clerk. He later worked as an accountant in the Stanleyville Post Office, now Kisangani. He kept making contributions to the Congolese press there. His political career. In 1955, Lumumba was elected regional president of a union that represented only Congolese government workers and was not linked with either of the two Belgian trade union federations, unlike other unions, Socialist and Roman Catholic. Additionally, he started participating in the Congo's Belgian Liberal Party. The party, albeit in many ways conservative, was not affiliated with either of the trade union federations, which were hostile to it. Lumumba and other participants were asked by the Minister of Colonies to visit Belgium in 1956 as part of a study tour. After arriving home, he was detained on suspicion of embezzling money from the post office. After several reductions in punishment, he was found guilty and given a 1-year term of 12 months in prison and a fine. After being released from prison, Lumumba became even more involved in politics. Along with other Congolese politicians, he founded the first national political party for the country on October 1958 under the name Congolese National Movement, Mouvement National Congolais, MNC. He participated in the inaugural All-African People's Conference in December in Accra, Ghana, where he met nationalists from all across the African continent and was elected to the permanent group the conference established. His language and worldview, which had previously reflected Pan-Africanist ideals, have since adopted a militant nationalist tinge. As nationalist sentiment rose, the Belgian authorities proposed a plan that would eventually result in the Congo's independence, beginning with municipal elections on December 1959. The nationalists declared a boycott of the elections after claiming that this program was an attempt to create puppet leaders prior to independence. Repression was the response of the Belgian authorities. A fight broke out in Stanleyville on October 30 and left 30 people dead. An accusation of instigating riots led to Lumumba's imprisonment. In Stanleyville, the MNC entered the elections after deciding to change its strategy and won with a resounding victory, 90% of the votes. In order to debate political change, the Belgian government called a round-table conference of all Congolese parties on January 1960 in Brussels. However, the MNC refused to attend without Lumumba. The following day, Lumumba was flown to Brussels after being released from prison. An independence date of June 30 with national elections in May was decided upon by the conference. Lumumba became the most prominent nationalist politician in the Congo, despite the fact that there were several parties and the MNC won the elections by a wide margin. He was requested to create the first administration, which he did on June 24 after maneuvers to stop his takeover of power failed in 1960. Lumumba as Prime Minister. The decolonization movement in Africa as a whole served as the backdrop for Congo's transformation from a Belgian colony to an independent state. Additionally, it took place during a period when the Cold War between the US and the USSR dominated the global political landscape and their respective allies. Almost immediately after the June 30 Independence Day, in his 1960 Independence Day speech, Lumumba said, "We are going to show the world what the black man and woman can do when he works in freedom, and we are going to make of the Congo the center of the sun's radiance for all of Africa. We are going to keep watch over the lands of our country so that they truly profit her children." Several army units rebelled, primarily due to issues with their Belgian leadership. The resulting confusion was exploited by Moise Tshombe, who seized it as an opportunity to declare that the mineral-rich region of Katanga was breaking away from the Congo. Belgian troops were deployed, purportedly to defend its citizens from the unrest, but they primarily arrived in Katanga, where they supported Tshombe's separatist rule. The Congo requested assistance from the UN to drive the Belgians out and establish domestic stability. Lumumba attempted to correct the situation as prime minister in what little way he could. The United Nations forces, whose presence he had requested, were haughty and forceful, and the political connections underpinning his rule were very precarious. His army was a flimsy tool of power, and his civilian administration was unskilled and untested. The Belgian troops remained, and the secession of Katanga went forward. Lumumba made a request to the Soviet Union for planes to help in the transportation of his troops to Katanga after the United Nations forces refused to assist in quelling the Katangi's uprising. To combine their forces behind him, he requested that the independent African states gather in Leopoldville in August. His actions scared a lot of people, especially the Western allies and President Kasavubu's followers, who supported some local autonomy in the provinces and took a moderate stance in the coalition administration. Dismissal, arrest, and assassination. President Kasavubu fired Lumumba on September 5, but Lumumba immediately disputed the decision's legality, leading to a split in power as two factions each claimed to be the legitimate central authority. Colonel Joseph Mobutu, who would later become president of Zaire as Mobutu Sese Seko, took control of the country on September 14. He later came to terms with Kasavubu. The United Nations, UN, General Assembly approved Kasavubu's government's credentials in November. Angry disagreements emerged among the independent African republics on this matter. At the same time, in October, Mobutu had Lumumba confined under house imprisonment in Leopoldville, where he was protected by both Mobutu's and the UN's security personnel. Following the General Assembly's decision to acknowledge Kasavubu's administration, Lumumba broke out of his home confinement and tried to get to Stanleyville, where his followers were in power. On December 2, nevertheless, he was apprehended and detained by Mobutu's security forces. The Belgian, Congolese, and Katangan authorities arranged for Lumumba's transfer to a different location that they believed to be more secure, and one that would almost certainly result in his death, because they were concerned that the soldiers there were sympathetic to him. Lumumba was initially detained at a military camp in Thisville, now Mbanza-Ngungu. On January 17, 1961, Joseph Okido and Maurice Mpolo, two of Lumumba's accomplices, were transported to Elizabethville, now Lubumbashi, where they were given to the secessionist government in Katanga and its Belgian advisors. They had been thrashed by the soldiers accompanying them on the journey, and after landing in Katanga, they were beaten once more. Later that day, Lumumba, Okido, and Mpolo were put to death by firing squad while being led by Belgian soldiers. After being first buried in shallow graves, their bodies were eventually dug up by Belgian officers, cut into pieces, and either burned or dissolved in acid. The Katangan administration didn't declare Lumumba dead formally until February 13. At that point, they claimed that he had fled from their custody and had been found by villagers, who then killed him. But shortly after his passing, rumors of Lumumba's demise began to spread. Although the official government account of his death was swiftly refuted, it would take years for the complete details to be made public. Even his adversaries afterward referred to him as a national hero, after his death generated a scandal throughout Africa and beyond. Assessment. The causes of Lumumba's stirring up such strong feelings are not immediately clear. His point of view was not unique. He opposed the country's split along ethnic or regional lines and was in favor of a unified Congo. He backed Pan-Africanism and the liberation of colonial lands like many other African leaders. He said that his government would practice positive neutralism, which he characterized as a return to African ideals and a rejection of all imported ideologies, including those from the Soviet Union. But Lumumba had a strong moral code and was determined to carry out his political agenda, no matter who he alienated at home or abroad. Furthermore, the Congo was a crucial region in terms of African geopolitics, and Lumumba's opponents had good reason to worry about the repercussions of a radical or radicalized Congo state, given its richness, size, and proximity to white-dominated southern Africa. Additionally, many in the West perceived the Soviet Union's support for Lumumba at the time as a threat because of the Cold War. The African Students Association called an emergency meeting the day after Lumumba's assassination and criticized African upstarts Moise Tshombe and Joseph Mobutu for allowing themselves to be used as colonial stooges, and Belgium and the UN for contributing to this cruelty. They announced that they would demonstrate in the streets against the Congolese leader's assassination the following day, which they dubbed Lumumba Mourning Day. The scholars connected Lumumba's passing to more general concerns about African unification and people's rights in Africa. While Nigerian graduate student Samuel Okori recommended writing letters to African leaders, AASA Vice President Steve McKinwa viewed the group's efforts as an indication that for the first time that Africans are unified, requesting the establishment of an African Liberation Army. Aspects of Cold War politics were also debated by AASA members, who saw concerns over a communist presence in Congo as another sort of involvement in African issues. Lumumba's passing served as a rallying cry for African activists in Montreal and their allies, as well as a catalyst for harsh criticism of political developments in recently independent African countries that displayed Canadian racism and a particularly imperialist and paternalist attitude toward Africa and its people. Circumstances leading to the return of the Golden Tooth. The possibility of the remains being found led to a decision being made to permanently make them disappear. There must be no remaining traces, based on testimony that was cited in DeWitt's book, The Assassination of Lumumba. Soide then led a team in moving, destroying, and disposing of the remains with the use of saws, sulfuric acid, face masks, and whiskey. He later referred to the procedure as taking him to the depths of hell. But he did not officially admit his involvement or the fact that he still had a tooth in his possession until over 40 years later in 1999. He claimed to have disposed of the further body parts he stole. When Ms. Lumumba thinks back to hearing that a piece of her father still survived, she sighs heavily. She responds in an emotional tone, "You can understand how I felt about that." What Soide did with the tooth when he had it in his hands is unknown. It is depicted in an image in a cushioned box, however. It is unclear if it was on exhibit. However, it did stay in his family. In 2016, shortly before the 55th anniversary of Lumumba's murder, Soide's daughter Godelieve gave an interview to the Belgian magazine Humo, which was then published. She talked about her sad daddy, who had to endure suffering because of what he had done. Ms. Soide also believed her family deserved an apology for the directive given to her father by Belgian authorities. Although much of his private material was discarded after his death in 2000, she claimed to have been able to save some of it. One of those items was the tooth she displayed for the interviewer and photographer. Following a 4-year legal battle, a court ordered that it be restored to the Lumumba family after it had been taken by the Belgian police following a complaint from DeWitt. Ms. Lumumba penned a heartfelt and beautiful open letter to King Philip as part of the campaign to get it back. Why have Lumumba's remnants been sentenced to wander aimlessly as a spirit eternally without a grave to protect his ultimate rest after his horrible murder? Her query. Once the tooth is returned, the former premier will have a last resting place in a unique mausoleum in the nation's capital, Kinshasa. Georges Nzongola, a Congolese historian and the nation's UN ambassador, remarked, "This is what we generally do in our tradition. We like to bury our dead." Lumumba is our hero, and we want to give him a respectable funeral, so it's comforting for the family and the Congolese people. Even after the burial, it's still important to face the past. After years of official quiet were broken by DeWitt's book, a parliamentary inquiry was established in 1999 with the mandate of elucidating the precise circumstances of the assassination and the suspected involvement of Belgian politicians. 2 years later, in its conclusions, it stated that in the 1960s, international politically correct thinking norms were different. However, even though the investigation discovered a paper ordering Lumumba's assassination, it concluded that some government officials were morally accountable for the events up to the execution. The Lumumba family and the Congolese people that received apologies and deep and heartfelt regrets from Belgian Foreign Minister Louis Michel. In a personal interview with the BBC, Professor Nzongola expressed his view that Belgium has not completely acknowledged its involvement in the assassination. "It's not entirely satisfactory," he said, "because Belgium won't accept blame for something they know they did." The murder is being handled as a war crime by Belgian prosecutors. However, 10 of the 12 suspects have passed away, and the investigation has been going very slowly for 10 years. A further step toward rapprochement between Belgium and the DR Congo over the colonial history and Lumumba's passing will be the return of the tooth. "That's a step, and we must move forward," says his daughter. She contends, however, that the Congolese side must also face some consequences because some of her countrymen were also complicit in her father's demise. "We must accept both the good and the ugly aspects of our past." She continues, "We need to know our past, to develop our future, and to live in the present, with a flourish befitting the former Prime Minister." A chance to reflect on the past will be presented by the burial of the tooth, which is scheduled to take place on the same day as the 62nd anniversary of Lumumba's renowned Independence Day speech. That brings us to the end of the video. What are your thoughts on this, and do you think this ended fairly for Lumumba? Let us know in the comments section below. For more entertaining and educative videos, click on the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you'll be notified every time we upload a new video.